What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Doing well. Glad you are back for this one, man. And I got a hard time from some people on Monday who said that I should have given the ode to you and actually said it's a great day to talk football and all that. I didn't do it, Harmon. I'm sorry. I didn't drop that on Monday's episode, but I did have a really fun time talking to Scott and getting a chance to catch up with him. So it was sad that you weren't there. It was nice to get to talk to Scott, which I haven't got to do very much during the regular season here with us. Also busy.
Yeah, we're in the podcast. Well, I'm in the podcast bunker. You're spending some time in the podcast bunker, most of the time in the rankings bunker. Scott is bottled down with the newsletter. So we're all like grinding. So it's good that you guys got to talk. And yeah, I appreciate you holding it down for me, pal. Do not ever feel the need to use any of my stupid idiosyncrasies on this podcast. Like, I say the same thing every day because it's just, that's what I do. You can do whatever the hell you want. Like,
exactly.
I
felt the need to like spread my wings and do it my own way, right? We're not just going by a template here. So yeah, it was fun though, man. I always stepping into that seat when I get the opportunity.
Well, I'm sure the Boone heads out there were pissed that the episode wasn't, 20 minutes long or whatever. They want you only for 20-minute spurts. But no, we get you for the full 90-minute experience here, Justin Boone. And that's what we're doing today because it is a big show. It's the fantasy football playoffs. It's the week 16 preview. Your semifinal matchups are here. We're going to give you basically everything you need to know in one show. What a deal for you today. First two segments, Boone's 6-pack of questions. Segment number 3, literally no one's games of the week. Segment number 4, it is the hurry up offense. So let's waste no more time, no more fluff. Let's dive into this here. Let's jump into Boone's 6-pack of questions for week 16. All right, Boone, hit me. What is the first question of the week?
All right, who are going to be the surprise week winners in the fantasy semifinals? We know they happen all the time, right? We've talked about different like league winners throughout the year and down the stretch, but now we're trying to figure out exactly who is going to help us advance here. And we have some guys, I think, this week that are kind of coming out of nowhere. Some of them are guys that have disappointed a little bit that I think are going to bounce back and potentially have good games. The first one that I want to mention is Jauan Jennings, and he's going up against the Colts here. This is a player who hasn't had like huge monster performances, but he's been really excelling. The last 6 games, 6 touchdowns. That's fantastic. Again, the yardage hasn't been like through the roof by any means, but he's coming off one of his best performances of the year here. He scored twice en route to the wide receiver 11 result. He was a name that I had brought up weeks ago, telling people that when they came back from bye, the 49ers were going to put up some points. And I think they're going to continue to do that here. And next up, they get the Colts defense. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to receivers, including Harmon, a top 12 weekly finisher at the position in 4 of their last 5 games. And if you're wondering about that 5th game, it was Jackson Smith and Jigba. He finished as the wide receiver 14. So a top 14 fantasy wideout in 5 straight. Jennings right now with Ricky Pearsall banged up again, which is super unfortunate, but that makes Jennings the unquestioned number 1 receiver in this offense. So I think you're starting him as a wide receiver 2, and it would not shock me at all if he finishes as a top 12 receiver again this week.
Yeah, really frustrating. Obviously, that Ricky Pearsall is not going to play in this game, most likely. Did exactly what I was telling you last week. That he was gonna bounce back coming out of the bye. He had that game against the Titans. It was the perfect matchup for him. This would have been a good one as well. But yeah, now all of that goodness gets to go to Jauan Jennings, who, in his own right, is a darn good football player. I think can make good on this matchup. So, I by the way, he's a guy who's playing for incentives in his contract this season, and obviously is still playing for a big contract next season. So sometimes I think some of the fantasy bros out there go a little too hard on the contract incentive. I don't know what your opinion on this, but go a little too hard in the contract incentive stuff at the end of the season. It's like fun to note in week 18 when fantasy's over and maybe you're doing some DFS prop bets, whatever. But I do think for Jennings definitely is still motivated to play for the contract going into this upcoming offseason where he will be one of the best free agents on the market.
Yeah, it's like another one of those data points to consider, right? You don't want to make that the only thing that you're basing a ranking or a lineup decision on, but it's another factor, helps with tiebreakers and maybe boosts a guy up a spot or two in the rankings when they have something on the line like that. It's definitely something that you have to consider, though. And it's great now that people are really all over it. So I don't have to go do that research myself. We can just let everybody else do it and throw it out there, and we can pick it up along the way, because in years past, I used to go through it all myself, which I'm glad I don't have to do anymore, Harmon. But I want to go back and forth here. I want to hear some of yours.
Okay.
So who do you have as a potential, week winner that's going to get people into the fantasy playoffs, into the fantasy championship week next week?
I've got CJ Stroud going against the Las Vegas Raiders. Number one, it's a good matchup. The Raiders stink. And I also think that this Texans offense is kind of quietly coming together, man. He's played really well. I think CJ Stroud has, coming off that injury. He had the one kind of interception in his first game back. Other than that, I think he's played really good football. I love when the projections change on the screen as we're talking. Like, don't doubt me, Yahoo Fantasy projections. Come on, I'm making a good case here for CJ Stroud. I think the offensive line has played better in front of him. I think the run game has been really a big benefactor of that as well. We'll see about Woody Marks' status in this game, but regardless, going against this Texans team, I think they'll be able to protect. I think they'll be able to block it up. And then we're looking at a group of receivers who I think Nico Collins is playing at an elite level right now. He can get the football. They rotate basically everybody else. I just love the way Stroud is playing right now. It's a good matchup. So, he's definitely somebody that if you are, kind of waffling with your starting quarterback, I think he's a fringe top 10, certainly top 12 performer on the week to see in week 16.
Yeah, and if you're trying to find that guy to potentially be that streamer, to be that low-end QB1 to get into your lineup, if you look at a matchup where the team is favored by a couple touchdowns, that means there's probably going to be a decent amount of points scored in that game. And guess what? The quarterback is often involved in that scoring. So I think there is a great shot that he is going to at least be a part of a couple touchdowns in this game, if not more. And you mentioned it. We'll talk about Woody Marks and this backfield a little bit later, but there's injuries across the board. It's not just Woody Marks. It's Nick Chubb. We're trying to figure out who is going to be in that backfield for this game. That might be another reason why they just throw a little bit more. And they have so much talent, right? Like the receiving core, we're finally seeing, a guy like Jaden Higgins get a little more involved. I know he had a down game last week, but prior to that, he had at least 5 targets in 5 straight games. So it was great to see him getting more involved. I think in this matchup, it's a spot where you could give him some run, maybe let him spread his wings and do a little something. And then a guy like Dalton Schultz, who I'm not normally a fan of, not somebody that I normally want to have in my lineup, but he's been playing great this year. So they have a lot of weapons, and this team is kind of putting it together at the right time, which makes them scary in real life, thinking about the playoffs as a Bills fan here, but also, pretty enticing for fantasy down the stretch.
Yeah, good shout on Dalton Schultz. I talked about it with Ray earlier this week as well, and he's just been a good part of their just check down package, which is, again, get that ball out of CJ Stroud's hands. Stroud has made good decisions. He's kept the offense moving. I've said it a lot this week. I picked up CJ Stroud in my team that survived with Justin Herbert last week, and those are two guys I think all the way up till Sunday I'm going to be weighing, like, do I stick with Herbert in a great matchup but with so many ecosystem concerns there, or do I go with CJ Stroud? So I have certainly been kicking that decision around in my head. Probably will do that all till Sunday. Let's get one of your surprising week winners here for week 16.
So I will say this guy's going to be a common thread in the first 3 questions in this segment. I did not realize that when I was putting it together. And perhaps it's because he is on my mind because I'm trying to figure out where should I be playing him, which running back should I be playing him over. The guy I'm talking about is Michael Carter, and he's going against the Falcons this week. I brought him up on the Waiver Wire show on Monday. I thought he was the top ad, somebody that people should be going out aggressively to get. This is the reason why I don't think we should stress about fantasy football, because you look at this backfield and it's like, who would have predicted before the season James Conner goes down, Trey Benson goes down. Now Bam Knight is going to be out for the next couple of weeks here. Amari DeMarcado dealt with an injury. He came back last week but didn't play very much. We'll see if he gets more work this week. And that just leaves us all for Michael Carter to potentially be that real surprise late season league winner type. Last week, 80% of the snaps, 94 scrimmage yards, 4 receptions, had 18 total touches. And that was against the Texans defense, who we know is like the scariest unit out there at the moment. Now he gets the Falcons. They're a positive matchup for fantasy running backs. And if he holds down this lead back job, which I think he is going to, and if your team gets a win this week, then he gets the Bengals in week 17. And we have eyed these matchups up for a while with every single back. We were talking about Trey Benson before he didn't return, right? Oh, he's going to get these great matchups in the fantasy playoffs. All right, he's not coming back. It's going to be Bam Knight. No, well, now we're jumping on Michael Carter. Hopefully that's not a curse, and hopefully he's not going to get hurt this week and they're going to have to go to somebody else here. But I think he does have this thing on lockdown going into this game. I'm very excited about potentially playing him. It just depends on what your options are here. Demercado's explosive. He had some big plays earlier in the season, but like I mentioned, he got hurt, and I think the coaching staff still holds something against him for that fumble at the goal line. I feel like they don't look at him the same since that happened, the way they talked about him in the media and stuff. So I think they're going to give Carter his shot, and he has 2 games this year where he's gotten at least 15 touches, Harmon. The first was obviously the one I just mentioned last week, which was a great fantasy outing. The other one was against an easier opponent in the Titans earlier in the season at week 5. He had 23 touches. He turned that into 73 yards and a score. And I think that is definitely possible here. I think we could see him get 70, 75 plus scrimmage yards and find the end zone. He's going to be the guy around the goal line in this one. I really like him. I might even move him up higher. Right now I have him as like a high-end RB3. I want to push him up into that low-end RB2 range because I do think he is going to have a great game this week.
Any like names you'd throw out that you'd kind of give the people like this is a bucket of players that maybe he would be around if you moved him up, just so kind of people can make some of those start-sit decisions?
Yeah, like when you're thinking about, I need to pull my rankings up to do it properly, but when you're thinking about guys like, Aaron Jones and, Tanner Tracy Jr. and the guys in that range, right? Like right now I'm looking at, and I always, spoil the fact that we're recording this before the Thursday night game. And again, hopefully I'm not putting any primetime curses on anyone, but Kenneth Walker is someone that I have on a bunch of teams that we've talked about all season long. And right now I'm looking at playing Carter over Kenneth Walker this week. And some people will be listening to this on Friday and they will either think that I'm a genius or a fool, one way or the other. But regardless, I don't know how you could trust Kenneth Walker with what he's done recently and against a very difficult opponent. And I actually think that Carter has more upside in this matchup, which is something I did not think I would be saying even a few weeks ago, Harmon, but here we are.
Here we are. What a wild world that we live in. Okay, I'll get to one of mine here. This is at the tight end position. You went running backs, wide receivers. I went with quarterback, tight end. So for me, it's Colson Loveland. And maybe this won't be that surprising at this point because now Luther Burden and Rome Odunze are not going to play on Saturday's game. But, man, Colson Loveland, I'm going to push him up into definitely top 10 territory at tight end, maybe closer to top 5. I just really like the way he projects. So a couple stats here on these Bears pass catchers. When Rome Odunze is not on the field, this is the yards per route run for the players on the Bears offense. Olamide Zaccheaus actually has the most routes when Rome Odunze is not on the field, 0.3 yards per route. Nothing burger. DJ Moore, 1.12. Nothing burger. Luther Burden, 4.13, obviously, but then Cole Kmet, 1.96. Okay, Colson Loveland, 2.4. Very good. Obviously, the most there outside of Luther Burden. We take Luther Burden off the field here, and then everything. Again, this is a small sample. We're talking about like 34 to 20-ish routes on the season. No Rome Odunze, no Luther Burden. But yards per out run goes 1.6 DJ Moore, 2.94 Colson Loveland, Cole Kmet 3.57. So I think actually Cole Kmet is more of a desperation play, but it's like the tight ends that have really thrived when both of those wide receivers are not on the field. Olamide Zaccheaus once again, by the way, 0.46. So I think you're getting too cute if it's like, oh, Zaccheaus or one of these guys is getting a big bump. Even DJ Moore, it's not like the big bump is going to him. I think the bump goes to the tight ends. I think they run out in a ton of 12 personnel, a lot of heavy packages. I think they're going to try to run the ball 40 times like they did against the Eagles. We'll see if that works as efficiently as it did against the Eagles. However, I think a big part of that will be the tight ends are on the field. They get into some of that play action. I think Colson Loveland has a big game on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to sell me on Colson Loveland. I feel like I've been trying to sell everyone else on him all year long. It's unfortunate that the way that he's potentially going to get there is because of injuries, whether it was earlier in the season when Cole Kmet got hurt or now watching these two receivers get ruled out for this game. But yeah, I got to bump him up. I had him as the tight end 13 before this. We got the news today. I haven't had a chance to do a rankings update this afternoon when that news came out. So I am definitely putting him into the top 10. And I agree with you. He is going to be very close to that top 5. You just see, and we're going to talk about a little later in the show about kind of the state of tight end this week, but there are a lot of guys that are in like a similar bucket when you go from tight end 3 or so all the way down to like tight end 15 or 16. you could kind of shuffle those guys up and deal them out however you want. And now because of this news, you got to move somebody like Loveland up, and I'd be playing him over kind of some surprising names like Travis Kelce. But again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show, so we'll get there. I love that call, though, Harmon. I think that he's somebody that could certainly step up and be a week winner here. I also think DK Metcalf is that kind of guy. And at any given week, like DK Metcalf can go off. We know that. This week, he's going against the Lions. This is the highest projected point total of the week, 52.5 at the moment. Should be plenty of points in the dome here. You don't have to worry about the weather, which is also nice because there will be some games. Doesn't seem to be a crazy week for weather right now, but there's always games this time of year where that comes into play. These guys are going to be in the dome. It's going to be points galore. And Metcalf has had some success on the road there in Detroit. Like, he's played there 3 years in a row. He had 104 yards, 75 yards, and 149 yards in those 3 games. So I'm feeling pretty good. I know those games weren't with the Steelers, but still, this is the kind of game where I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have to open it up, or they're going to have to throw the ball a bunch, and they're going to have to get Metcalf going if they want to have any chance of winning this one. You could also go back. I mean, the fourth time that he played, it was back in 2021, but he had 3 touchdowns in that game. Totally different Lions team, but still, I wanted to mention that because I'm looking at it right now. So yeah, the Lions are banged up in their secondary, banged up on defense. I think that helps him. And he's been producing lately too, right? 7 for 148 a couple weeks ago, had 12 targets in that game last week, 55 yards and a touchdown. So maybe not completely out of nowhere because he's put up some decent stats in the last couple of weeks, but I think this is going to be one of those boom weeks for him, one of those big Metcalf performances, and the kind of game that's going to get people into the fantasy championship. So right now for me, a wide receiver 2, but slowly moving up my rankings close to that wide receiver 1 range.
Yeah, we can basically tag team that one, man, because he's actually going to be my bold prediction of the week. I've already written it up, so I was happy to see you had him on the outline here because I was going to throw him out as well for this segment. Makes complete sense. The only notes I would add there is that regardless of the Lions' injuries, they still just play a bunch of man coverage and they play a ton of single high, and those just looks funnel to the X receiver. DK Metcalf obviously is the X receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I'm with you. I'm expecting like a big game from DK Metcalf here. 60 plus yards, at least 1 touchdown. I'm looking for a big performance here from Metcalf in that kind of Looney Tunes Steelers offense. But all right, so those are your surprising week winners for week 16. Let's get to your second question of the week.
All right, which running backs from some of these uncertain backfields can we actually trust this week? And there's a bunch of backfields we could discuss here. The Steelers with Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren. The Texans, like I mentioned earlier, with Woody Marks and Nick Chubb both banged up. We'll see if they're able to play this week. It seems like they're trending that way, but we're going to have to monitor that one all week. If not, Jawar Jordan, who I talked about in the waiver wire show, he could be somebody that could get some more work. The Cardinals, who we just discussed. The Saints with Audric Estime and Evan Hall, 2 names that we did not expect to be talking about this time of year. The Chiefs with Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, and Pacheco seeming like maybe he's starting to earn a little bit more work again. And then the Commanders. And I brought up JCM, Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, on the Monday show. I was thinking at that time that maybe Chris Rodriguez wouldn't be able to play again. He's practicing in full. He is going to play this week. He's off the injury report. And that just makes this like a huge jumbled mess in that backfield because I could see that one going in any direction. But I mean, we can go through these, Harmon. Like for the Steelers, they use both those backs quite a bit. So I think this is the one spot where you could probably start both these guys as top 30 options. Jalen Warren, yes, he has been the starter this year. He found the end zone 3 straight games before last week. So I think his fantasy managers were probably okay with how things were going, but he doesn't score a touchdown last week. And without that touchdown, it kind of shines a light on the spotlight and how things are trending with him, because Warren's now seen his playing time decrease in 3 straight games. He went from 55% to 50% to 45% this past week. Meanwhile, Kenny Gainwell, he's been going in the other direction, 42%, 48%, 52%. And Gainwell's been way more involved as a pass catcher, 13 receptions over the last 2 weeks, including 126 yards on 20 touches last week. I don't know about you, Harmon. I have actually ranked Gainwell above Warren, maybe for one of the first times this year with both guys healthy, just because I think right now he is the more exciting option fantasy-wise. I think they're both like high-end RB3s, but very interested to see how this one continues to play out. If I had to make the choice, I would go with Gainwell there.
I agree. I've talked about this with Ray earlier this week as well. Gainwell is Aaron Rodgers' favorite player. He is up there with like some of the best wide receivers in the NFL in terms of targets per route run. He indeed, just like Aaron Rodgers, I did my own research and I posted on social media that Kenny Gainwell was indeed not on the field for Jonnu Smith's rushing touchdown, even though you can visibly see, I shared the clip, like Rodgers getting super excited, like button helmets with Kenny Gainwell. That's it's his guy. And we know when Rodgers has a guy like that, he's going to continue to be involved in the offense. That's not to say he doesn't like Jalen Warren or anything, but I just think Gainwell's role as a pass catcher, especially in this type of game script we're expecting against Detroit, I agree with him over Jalen Warren for sure.
So if we move to the Texans backfield, just to talk through this one a little bit, it's going to come down to the injury statuses. So we don't need to go like too in depth, but the way I see it breaking down is if Woody Marks is healthy, he's the guy. He would be a top 20 back, if not top 15. The only question is when you're talking about a Texans team that has Super Bowl aspirations, like, do they really want to push him? Do they really want to risk him in a game like we mentioned earlier where they are big favorites in this one? I think they're going to roll. So even if he's out there, I think you better hope that he gets his points early, because I think at some point they could shift to Nick Chubb if he's healthy and if he's playing in this game, or Jawar Jordan late if they're up big, because why not? We saw what he did last week, went over 100 yards. Why not give him the reps and not put more on those lead guys? So that's the only thing that I'm a little bit worried about when it comes to Woody Marks, but that's one we're going to have to follow right until Friday to see if these guys are going to be able to play or not. Moving on, I mean, the Cardinals backfield, we already discussed them. You look at the Saints, this is probably the most interesting one of the mix here, because both backs I talked about on Monday's show, Devin Neal suffers the hamstring injury. He goes on IR today. He is not coming back for the fantasy season. So now we're going to get to see these guys do what they can, unless Alvin Kamara at some point comes back, which I don't think there's any reason for that. But
he
the
retired
matchup is so... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the matchup here is like so enticing that even though we're talking about Estime and Hall, like, how can you not want to play these guys? New York, they've given up the second most fantasy points to running backs this season. Just a mind-boggling 14 total touchdowns to running backs over their last 5 games, Harmon. Like, there are going to be points scored. Someone in this backfield is going off. Maybe both guys will have usable fantasy days. But you look what happened last week, like when Neal was out of the lineup, Estime saw the better part of like a near 55-45 split. He was the guy that was used more in the passing game. He had 50 scrimmage yards, had 6 touches. The majority of that, though, did come through the air. Hall just 12 yards on 4 carries. He was more active as a runner. Either guy could get the hot hand treatment here. Sorry, my throat. We're getting to the end of the week here. We've talked so much that the throat's starting to go here, starting to lose the voice a little bit. But yeah, like, we've seen both these guys perform last week. We kind of saw that it went towards Estime. This is going to be a new week, but based on what we saw last week, I am giving the slight lean towards Estime. He's also in that like RB3 range, could end up as an RB2 if he does end up getting more volume in this backfield. But regardless, this is one that I'm going to be researching all week long. Check out my rankings on Sunday morning, because I feel like there's going to be points scored here. I'm going to do every little bit of research I can to try to figure out who I actually think is going to score them. Right now, I would say Estime is that guy, but Hall is somebody that could potentially get work here as well. And it wouldn't shock me if this went either way.
I think it would. Yeah, it could go either way. I'm with you that right now I'm expecting to be Estime just because he was kind of already getting some work in that backfield. And I said this to Joel yesterday. In my deepest league final, I picked him up off the waiver wire and I'm starting him. It's like 3 flex players. It's the whole deal. I'm gonna play him against the Jets. So I'm hoping that it's Audric Estime. What a disgusting sentence. It's just one of those leagues where you play a ton of goofballs every now and again. So Audric Estime is definitely going to be my guy this week. I'll take the burden off you here for the last 2. I don't think there's any like interest for me personally with either of the Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco show or Chris Rodriguez or Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. Like, if it was the matchup against the Giants last week and it was going to be split 3 ways, I still think you could talk yourself into Chris Rodriguez. But especially for what Bill showed last week, why would they not want to just continue to give him some touches towards the end of the season? It's not like Rodriguez was blowing it away or anything. And now I know the Eagles have been gettable. Jalen Carter is not going to play that matchup. I just think both those guys' profile is very much like what the heck flex is. And we know what the Hunt Isaiah Pacheco show is. Is anybody taking the field for the Chiefs on Sunday? Nobody's practicing. All the mainstay guys aren't out there. So are they just going to wave the white flag without Patrick Mahomes? Kind of feels like that vibe right now. I'm not interested in either of those guys. I mean, if you have to, I get it. I'd prioritize Hunt over Pacheco, but not a lot of appeal there for me.
Yeah, to cap this whole thing off, because I've kind of mentioned as we've gone along, like, okay, RB2 value, RB3 value. I would rank, the top 7 of the guys that we just talked about, because some of the backups I don't think we need to mention, but Woody Marks would be first if he's healthy. Kenneth Gainwell would be second in that RB3 range. Jalen Warren not far behind him. Michael Carter might jump Jalen Warren. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I'm going to keep pushing him up as the week goes along. And then you get down into the more like risky RB3 types, which is like Kareem Hunt, Audric Estime, and Chris Rodriguez, where you're probably going to need a touchdown to get home there. But like I said, of that group, I probably would shoot to play Estime and just hope that you get a bigger game, because I think ceiling-wise of those guys down at the bottom of that list, I think he actually does have the highest ceiling of those last 3 that I mentioned.
All right, let's get to your third question here. And this is another one for me personally. I am very invested in the answer to this one.
Well, I'm assuming that you've done some research, because you told me that this is going to be a decision that you have to make. But I just want to talk about the Cardinals offense. Are they going to be the key to fantasy titles? And again, we're talking about, discussion points and storylines that we never thought would be the case at this time of year, especially if you thought that Kyler Murray was going to be out. But Jacoby Brissett totally unlocks this offense. The matchups I mentioned earlier, the Falcons this week, the Bengals next week, those are favorable spots. Helps that they're indoors this week. This game is also tied with the 3rd highest projected point total on the week at 48.5. But here's where it really gets interesting. Marvin Harrison Jr. is practicing. He's practicing in a limited fashion, but he is practicing, so he might return this week. We know Jacoby Brissett, he just put up his 9th straight game as a top 12 fantasy quarterback. He has been a QB1 every single week since he took this job. Can't believe that, especially last week. It happened against the Texans. And sure, some of this happens in garbage time. I don't care. It just keeps happening. If he can do it against the Texans, he can do it against anybody. McBride, maybe in a slightly tougher spot. The Falcons are pretty good against tight ends, but he is matchup proof. You're not sitting him for anyone, not worried about him whatsoever. I discussed the backfield here and my hope there for Michael Carter. But really, Harmon, it goes back to the receivers, and this is where your decision comes in for your lineups. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson. What are we doing with these guys? And the last time this happened, when Marvin Harrison Jr. came back from an injury, he went back to being the number 1 receiver in the offense. He had 6 catches for 69 yards. We saw Michael Wilson take the back seat, 3 catches for 36 yards. He did have 7 targets in that game, but not nearly as much production as we're used to, because, of course, the other games when we've seen Harrison Jr. sitting out, Michael Wilson is just a top 10 fantasy wideout, if not better. So how excited are you here trying to make this decision? Are you pumped? Are you excited to get Marvin Harrison Jr. back? Or are you just sad, which is kind of the side I feel, just sad that we might not get this same Michael Wilson that's been crushing it for our fantasy lineups over the last month or so?
The thing is, I've got one team with Marvin Harrison Jr. and I've got one team with Michael Wilson. And the reality is they're separate teams. And the reality is, with the state of the receiver core in both of them, especially the one with Marvin Harrison, like I need him to come back. Like I need him back because Odunze's out and now Pearsall's out again. I need Drake London. He's got to come back. That receiver. Here's the deal: those guys don't come back, I lose the matchup. Doesn't matter anyway. So I kind of need him to be back for that one, but. The Michael Wilson experience obviously is a big reason that other team got a first round bye, and I'd have to play Michael Wilson last week. So it's obviously not ideal. You'd like the clarity of just, okay, it's Wilson without Harrison. We know he is a guy that we just go ahead and say, regardless of the matchup, we saw it last week with the Texans, doesn't matter. You play him anyways. It's just the script is so good. This team literally did not run a neutral game script last week. Pat Thorman had that in one of his posts. That is just how crazy this Cardinals offense. I actually do think there's a chance they could win this game, which, we haven't seen them in many positive game scripts, but just with the way the Falcons are right now, I think it's actually could be a competitive game, which you might argue maybe there's more efficiency in the pass game, which you're going to have to count on, because I think the volume being split three ways, it just makes it trickier. The only thing I've looked up in relation to this game, and I just don't even really know if this matters because there's so many weird, unique circumstances with this team, but the Falcons obviously play a ton of single high. They're second in the NFL according to Fantasy Points data in single high coverage percentage. Yards per route against single high, Marvin Harrison leads the team at 2.2, Michael Wilson 1.9, and then Trey McBride pretty close behind at 1.89. So I think obviously what I'm hoping for, typically, again, when, like we just said with Metcalf, when you're seeing a lot of those single high defenses, that's going to funnel targets to the X receiver. For the most part, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the X over Michael Wilson when those guys are both healthy. But I think it was a very brief time, that Buccaneers game, where you got to see, okay, now they figured out Michael Wilson can play. They used him a little bit at X and then moved Harrison around. So I'm kind of hoping that both those guys get their chances to exploit what's a very gettable matchup. And to your point about the Falcons being better against tight ends than wide receivers, I've mentioned this metric before. 4for4 has a schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed metric. They're 32nd against wide receivers are the Atlanta Falcons. They're 6th against tight ends. So if you're looking to start one or both of these receivers, ideally, again, not on the same team, but if you're starting one or the other, I think that's the type of stuff you got to kind of hang your hat on there.
Yeah, and I don't want to put too much into practice film, but there's a couple of receivers coming back from injury that, at least in the clips we've seen in practice, I don't know that they look like they're totally 100%, and I would put Harrison in that category. Again, it's a few practice clips you're looking at. You don't know if they're pushing it at that point of the day or anything like that, right. But I still question, coming back from injury, it's possible we're talking about a heel injury as well. That's the kind of thing that could impact a receiver. Matchup 2 with AJ Terrell, who's a pretty decent corner. So I think I might just be trying to talk myself into still playing Michael Wilson on teams here, Harmon, because I want to.
I'm gonna rank Michael Wilson ahead of Harrison. That would just for me. I'm gonna do that this week.
And to me, that is only injury based. If we knew that Harrison was 100%, I would have him ranked higher, and I would have them both kind of in that low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 range. But if I knew he was 100%, I would rank him higher because I'm questioning whether he is. That's the only reason in my mind why I'll still have Wilson ahead of him this week. But I'm hoping that they keep throwing to Wilson the way that they have, because a lot of my fantasy teams are depending on it.
Outrageous that we have to care this much about the Cardinals passing game, and yet we do, because we both have teams with these Arizona Cardinals wide receivers. Let's hope everything works out for us. We're going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue to run through questions here heading into Week 16. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing to run through questions here heading into Week 16. Boone, we're sticking at wide receiver land for this next one.
Yeah, and we're also sticking with listener questions for the second part of the show, like we have been doing for the last few weeks here. And tons of questions again this week, so thank you to everybody for that. I thought as we got deeper into the fantasy playoffs, the questions would trickle down, trickle off kind of thing. It has not been the case. It has gone the complete opposite direction. So I tried to pick 3 here that will kind of apply to the most people, a little more general questions with a lot of start sit stuff. It's tough when it's really, really specific, everybody. So I appreciate those questions as well. I'll try to jump on if I get time and answer some of them on social media, but you need kind of a more general question that's going to apply to a lot of people. So the first one here is from @SeanB21682. Who are you looking to grab off waivers if I need to replace Rashee Rice? I have Jaden Reed and Jalen Coker. So basically, Harmon, just who are we looking at? Who can step in? And I certainly have teams like this where I did not expect Rashee Rice wasn't going to be available this week, has not practiced the first 2 days, doesn't look like he's going to clear concussion protocol here. So we need to find other options. I don't want to just make this waiver wire 2.0. Oh, that's kind of what this is, though. And he mentions here, right, that Jaden Reed and Jalen Coker, those are 2 of the best options. I would certainly bring those guys up. If they're already on your roster, then I think you're set. You're probably going to play Reed this week in lieu of Rice. It's unfortunate, but it's not a bad play. Now, Christian Watson is potentially still going to play this week. We don't know that for sure. He's listed as questionable. He got in some practices. The coaches seemed like they were pretty happy with what they saw. I still feel like the Packers tend to be pretty cautious when it comes to injuries. So I don't know if they're going to push him out there this week, but it looks like he at least has a chance to play in this one. That will change Reed's projection a little bit here, but he would still be somebody that would be worthy of getting into your lineup as a wide receiver 3 flex option. And I've talked about him a bunch. I think you really like him too, Harmon. He's a guy that's played pretty well here. Not huge stats, but over 50 scrimmage yards in both his last 2 games since coming back. And he's a guy that in the past, we've seen him get really hot over short stretches. So for one game, you're looking for a talented player you can put in there in a good offense. He certainly fits the bill. Adonai Mitchell is the next one I want to mention here. He's going up against the Saints. Now, he's only 18% rostered. When we're talking about Reed, he's like right up at 47% rostered. So he might already be taking it in a lot of spots. AD Mitchell is still available in most leagues here. He had a huge game in week 13. Then a down week in week 14. Very usable stat line last week, though, 6 for 58 and a touchdown. I wonder how many people were playing him, though, after the down week, other than like very deep dynasty leagues where I was certainly starting him in those. But other than that, I'm not sure that he was in a lot of lineups last week. And you look at him now, the coaching staff really likes him. They keep talking him up. They love the work ethic. They love what they're seeing. And I think we've always really liked what we were seeing on the field. He just needed to clean some stuff up. Now he's getting the volume. He has a pretty high ceiling here, but a very low floor as well. So this one is kind of boom or bust, but he's also in that wide receiver 3 flex range. The other 2 that I'll mention, and then I'll let you chime in here, Harmon. Jaden Higgins going up against the Raiders. We talked about him earlier. Just 1 catch last week, but like I said, at least 5 targets in 5 straight games before that, and at least 55 yards or a touchdown in 4 of those 5 games where he had at least 5 targets. Now he gets the Raiders. It's a nice matchup for him. They're getting up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so he's somebody that you could consider. Another guy, though, that's 41% rostered, so might be taken. And then the one that you could fall back on if all these other guys are spoken for is Jalen Coker playing against the Bucs. It seems like it's happening here, Harmon. It seems like we're finally getting what we've always wanted. Over 50 yards in 3 of his last 4, found the end zone each of his last 2 games. He's turning into that second option in the Panthers passing attack. And I think he is a decent wide receiver 4 flex, maybe even better. I think there's a lot of upside there for fantasy managers who need help. And he would be the guy that is out there in almost every league where you can't actually get him and throw him in your lineup.
I like all these suggestions a lot. Jaden Reed's definitely, I think, playing really well. The stats haven't come, but we know he's capable of a big game. He would probably be the guy I'd rank first of this group, but Adonai Mitchell definitely not far behind, man. I would totally admit I was not expecting anything from him last week with Brady Cook. And, I know the final stat line with Brady Cook was atrocious against the Jaguars, but I swear early in that game, watching that one, he was actually playing pretty well and making some throws specifically to Adonai Mitchell. I think they've got a good thing going. Cook is starting again here, so I do think he is definitely in consideration. Yeah, we know Jaden Higgins not a full-time player, but this is the type of matchup you'd want a chance. Coker, man, yeah, dude, he's like legitimately not, I like him, it's a little cute Twitter thing, whatever. No, that guy's like actually balling out the last 2 games, the game before the bye and the game after. He made some outrageous catches against the Saints on Sunday. I know McMillan is dealing with an injury now too. That's another thing here. I know he's like kind of playing through it, so he's had a bit of a slump here towards the end of his rookie season. No worries about him long term, but I definitely think that's part of it. But Coker, meanwhile, looks like their best receiver against man coverage right now the last few weeks. So definitely someone that I think you can absolutely play in this Bucs matchup. The only guy I would throw out that's a deeper name here, I think this is definitely getting a little cute, but if you're absolutely desperate, Josh Downs did get some good usage last week I like Josh Downs. I was totally wrong about how I thought Josh Downs' season would go this year. It's mostly been a playing time issue for him. That was not an issue with Phillip Rivers last week. He ran around on 89% of the dropbacks, which is clearly a season high. His previous season high was back in week 9 against the Steelers at 75%. I was kind of like, did they run more 11 personnel? Did they run more spread with Phillip Rivers? It's actually like Ashton Doolin is on IR, so they just do not have another receiver they want to play. Like they're basically just going to play Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. Those guys ran around on 100% of the dropbacks. Josh Downs, and I think they want to do. Josh Downs is obviously third there. I think they want to do less personnel rotation with Phillip Rivers. Like he just wants the guys that are trusted out there, and then where he's going to pinpoint and find the matchups, as opposed to when it's Daniel Jones, he's going to kind of do I'm the extension of Shane Steichen's, offense or whatever. This is more Phillip Rivers' brain is carrying a heavy load. It's a good matchup on Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers. So again, you're definitely getting cute if you're playing Josh Downs, but I do think scored the touchdown, 89% route participation, and Rivers is just throwing short. He's getting that football out of his hands. He's doing his little pitter-patter feet in the pocket and then getting the ball out to freaking Amir Abdullah and Josh Downs. Like, that's what he's doing right now. I guess probably what he does on Monday night as well.
And in theory, you would think the matchup being that much easier is going to allow them to have a little more success. I said on Monday, I don't think we're going to see Phillip Rivers throw for 300 yards against the 49ers or something like that, but could he get up closer to 200 yards as opposed to whatever he had last week, which was 120 or something like that? I think we could see them put up at least a few more yards through the air in this one. And if that happens, somebody's going to be catching the ball. So yeah, it's a really tricky spot that people have been put in. Don't feel bad, everybody out there. I have a lot of teams where I was rolling with elite receivers and not a lot of depth. That I always tell everybody, just load your benches with backup running backs. Who cares about receiver? Get good receivers, start them. And if you need to go to the waiver wire, you'll find your flex guy on the waiver wire. Well, now we're going to the waiver wire to find those flex guys. And I had a really interesting question, actually, I'll throw out there from a friend of mine today that he asked me, Brian Thomas Jr. or AD Mitchell. I thought that was a fantastic one because the matchup for BTJ is pretty tough. They're going against the Broncos. And you look at Mitchell and the volume that he's got, and it was a tough one. I still went with BTJ, but I didn't say it confidently by any means.
God, yeah, I actually have those guys really close in rankings.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd go BTJ just because it's the better offense. But God, it's a tough one. I think you're kind of relying on essentially the same thing, where you're looking for big plays against man coverage on the perimeter, and it's definitely a tougher matchup for BTJ. So I think I'd probably go a slight lean to BTJ there, but it's definitely not confident.
Yeah, the better quarterback and the better offense is really what I leaned on when I said that as well. But I also wanted to ask someone else because I worry that my AD Mitchell love, that bias might just throw off any take I have when it comes to picking him or another player. I didn't want to be overcorrecting there, so I'm glad you also said BTJ.
Very fair. All right, let's get to your next question of the week here.
Well, we said we were going to do it. We got to talk about the tight ends, and at Cousin Vinny with a ton of ends in Vinny. Hey, Justin, after the recent news of Drake London, Rashee Rice, Tua Tagovailoa, how would you rank Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce, and Darren Waller this week, half PPR? So I want to turn this into who are the best tight ends to start other than McBride and Kittle? Because I think those guys are very clearly the top two this week and probably the top two next week as well. After that, man, it gets wide open very quickly, like I said earlier. And for me, the way I have them ranked, after McBride and Kittle, it's Pitts, Goddard, Bowers, Fannin, Parkinson, who plays tonight, Kelce, Schultz, Waller, Tyler Warren, Dalton Kincaid, Colston Loveland, who I mentioned is going to be moving up several spots. We'll talk about that. Rondé Gadsden, and then you get into Jake Ferguson, Hunter Henry, Mark Andrews. Those are kind of the, veteran guys, it feels like low ceiling streamer types. That's how I have it ranked. But again, I could see anybody from tight end 3 all the way down to Andrews there, basically finishing in any order here. And if you look at the first 3 guys that the question was, I think they were ranked in the correct order as they got mentioned there: Pitts, Kelce, and Waller. Pitts I've actually warmed up to. On Monday's show, Harmon, we were talking about Pitts, and I said I was worried because all the reports from the coaching staff, they were so hopeful that Drake London's going to play this week and he's going to come back. But as the week's gone along, he's another one where I would say the practice videos haven't exactly looked inspiring. And then you remember, he's coming back from a PCL injury, and other guys that have come back from PCL injuries this year, they haven't necessarily hit the ground running. They haven't come back and just put up monster stats. So I've actually moved Pitts back up. I feel like Pitts is a guy who deserves to be kind of at the top of this giant tier, if you want to call it all one tier. I think he could have a fine game this week. If it was a situation where we knew that London was healthy and he was going to come back and be the same guy and command the same volume, then yes, I would push Pitts down and he'd be more of that mid to low end tight end 1. But I think based on the way he's played lately, some of the quotes from the coaches, and the fact that I just don't think London's 100%, I think he is by far the best play in that group there. Kelsey's interesting because I don't know what to expect from this offense. You kind of alluded to it when we were talking about the Chiefs backfield, right? Like, what's going to happen here? There's no Mahomes. I think Minshew's a decent backup. I think he could be a good relief starter for a little bit. And yet we're probably not going to have Rashee Rice out there. The matchup is good. Yes. But then you factor in like the Kelsey of it all, right? Like, what does he have to play for? This might be his last season. There's 3 games left. There's no playoffs at stake. I thought Scott made a great point. I don't know if you heard it on Monday where he said, what if it's like a Kobe Bryant situation where Kobe's last game, they just let him go off? Could that be the situation with Kelsey where they're like, hey, you got 3 games left. Let's just give you 15 targets a game and you just go out on your sword kind of thing, right? Like maybe that's the case here. I don't know if I want to believe in that. I could actually see it going the other way where they work in some of the other tight ends. They don't rely on him as much. They don't really need him to go out there and put up 100 yards at this point. It's kind of just playing out the string. So I have him down in that low end tight end 1 range. And then for Waller, I think you guys talked about on yesterday's show, right? The Quinn Ewers situation, he comes in. We don't really know what to expect there. Such a great matchup against the Bengals for Waller. And yet I look at him more as just one of those touchdown or bust kind of streamer types. And he showed us last week. He can at any moment give you a couple touchdowns in a game and have a huge performance for fantasy. And yet with Quinn Ewers under center, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't think it's going to get better than it was with Tua. Last week was very bad with the cold and all that sort of stuff. But I think this offense is probably going to get worse with Tua not under center, which is really saying something because it has not been good with Tua out there.
Yeah, I think all those are really good points. The Kelsey thing is difficult to read. I mean, dude, he's on his podcast talking about like the Chiefs will get him back next year relating to Patrick Mahomes. It's like that freaks me out that he's even saying the Chiefs, not we, right? I mean, is that like he's already mentally like I'm done at the end of the year, which you kind of imagine he would be. Tough way to go out, but I don't know that next year is going to be any better for Kansas City, with Mahomes coming back from a serious injury. So this might just be the time for Kelsey. I think if no Rashee Rice is the situation here, I think Kelsey's a guy that can get a lot of targets in that middle of the field area. Those guys kind of operate in the same zones anyways, so that would be a bump to him. For me, I would have my tight end ranks this week I'd have Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, Harold Fannin, Colson Loveland, Dallas Goedert, Colby Parkinson, Dalton Schultz, Darren Waller, Brenton Strange, Travis Kelce, and then like Tyler Warren, Kincaid, Ferguson, whatever. So kind of same-ish order there, some differences. But yeah, I mean, Pitts is the one that's interesting because I think you can't separate the fact that he's had this big breakout at the end of the year from the fact that Drake London has not been out there. But Drake London, the person, is going to be out there. Is Drake London, the guy that was putting up wide receiver 1 overall weeks, going to be out there? Probably not. But it really comes down to just, is Pitts going to get those same slot routes that he's got? He's like 30% slot player on passing downs with Drake London. It jumped up to 44% without Drake London. That might, even if Drake London's out there, he's not 100%, that still might hurt Kyle Pitts. So I still think he's a guy that I would play if I had him. I think I'd rock him over some of these other dudes. But yeah, for the most part, it's a little bit less appealing for me than it would have been obviously if no Drake London.
I will also mention on Woody Marks does not practice today, but Nick Chubb practiced in full. So factor that into the conversation that we had about the Texans backfield. I will also say on the Kelsey front, because we've talked about the Chiefs a couple times now on this show, 37.5 is the projected point total for that game. So I know it's Chiefs and it's Titans, but this is a much different version of the Chiefs. So if you're playing players in that game, you might want to break ties against it if you got somebody close, because that does not look like it's going to be a game that's going to have a lot of fantasy success. If we look at some of the other names here that are on this tight end list, though, like Goddard has a really nice matchup against the Commanders. They're giving up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. Bowers, what a fall from grace, right? Like he is just, it's so hard to trust. Gone from like this elite asset to now a guy that I'm just throwing in this giant group of tight ends. And I don't even feel like he's a guy that you necessarily have to play this week if you have an option in that same range with how that Raiders offense has looked. Fannon's got to go up against the Bills. They're giving up the fewest fantasy points to tight ends this season. So that doesn't look like a spot necessarily that he's going to have a ceiling game. I don't want to do the primetime tight end curse, but Parkinson plays Thursday night. There's some weather concerns, but with Devontae Adams out.
I am playing Colby Parkinson tonight, so if we could strike that from the record, tight end curse gods, let's not do that. Get him off the screen.
I also mentioned him
we're
on
not
Monday's
cursing
show.
him.
I do not want to see him have a bad game either. I do not want to see him have a bad game either whatsoever here because, I've advised everyone to pick him up and play him as a top 10 option this week, if not better. And he's been fantastic. I'm not going to run through all the stats that I talked about on Monday with him, but he's been so great. There's no possible way that he could have a bad game tonight, right? Knock on some wood. Dalton Schultz, who we talked about earlier, very solid season from him, but just somebody that I never feel great putting in my lineup for some reason. I don't know. I feel like I'm always surprised when exciting. He has a huge game. It's normally like 50 yards or so. There's a touchdown once in a while, but that's kind of the range we're getting into here, right? Waller was next for me. Tyler Warren, maybe he has a little more success. So like I said, maybe that whole Colts passing attack has a little more success in an easier matchup, but Warren hasn't been great even before that, right? Even before they went to Phillip Rivers, he's had some really down games the last few weeks. Kincaid's not 100%, and Kincaid didn't even practice today, so I'm not sure he's going to play this week. That would make Dawson Knox potentially a streaming option. He's been pretty good recently. So Loveland ends up kind of being like that guy that we're bumping up several spots. Like for me, I'm going to have him right around that Fan and Parkinson range with you. So top 6, top 7 kind of spot for him. And I think that's where he belongs based on the changes that have happened in the last 24 hours here, knowing that those two receivers are out and knowing the kind of talent that he is. And they want him to be a big part of that passing attack. And now he kind of has to be this week.
Yeah, he's been just awesome. And I think he's probably got the best hands on the team, does Colson Loveland. So I expect him to have a big week, as I said earlier. Yeah, that Kincaid one is interesting. I got a tough spot with Dawson Knox if I could play him on one of my teams where I've been streaming tight ends, and now you're making me think about this Dalton Kincaid thing, which is not good because my other option is playing tonight as well. So I got to make that decision here pretty soon. Okay, let's go to the next question and the final one here for Week 16.
So are there any stars that you should consider benching this week is the nature of it. And the question came from @Tornister3, who asked, 1 QB league, can Josh Allen be trusted despite his tough matchups against Cleveland and the Eagles? My other option is Jared Goff. So I wanted to answer this one. I feel like I've done like versions of this, over the last month or so. We've talked about these kind of things where I just keep reminding people, like, don't overthink these fantasy decisions. I know it feels so important, and all week long you're racking your brain. What should you do? But I think sometimes people end up getting too cute with this stuff. And I am definitely not playing Allen, or not sitting Allen to play Goff. Does that mean out of 100 tries, does Allen outscore Goff every single time? No, definitely not. There's a probabilities game, right? So I'm looking at this as this guy is the number 1 fantasy quarterback on the season. The next closest quarterback is Matthew Stafford, who is almost 3 points behind him on a per game basis. You're not going to sit that guy. Josh Allen has shown time in, time out in bad weather situations, in bad matchups, he can come through for you, right? And the Browns are not like infallible. Like Caleb Williams last week had a couple touchdowns against them. We've seen other top quarterbacks this year, Drake May, Lamar Jackson. They've had big games against Cleveland this year. And we've seen Allen come through against tough opponents like QB9 versus the Panthers, who are actually pretty good in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. QB3 versus the Chiefs, who are also a tough matchup. The only spot that he didn't come through was the Texans recently. That Texans defense is so tough, and they had his number. And no disrespect to Myles Garrett, but this Browns defense is not the Texans defense. So I'm not sitting Allen. He is still the number 1 quarterback for me this week. But I do think there's some other players who are, stars at their positions who you might want to think about sitting this week. One for me is Dak Prescott. He's going against the Chargers. He's a quarterback that is prone to having some down games once in a while. And the Chargers defense is another one of these defenses that is kind of scary to me. They've held 7 straight quarterbacks under 17 fantasy points. 4 of those 7 were held under 10 fantasy points. So definitely this is a dangerous game for Dak. I look at him as more of a low-end QB1 here, and a guy that could disappoint, could really let you down, like he sometimes lets the Cowboys down late in the season and we get to the playoffs. But I only said that to bother producer Colin. Another guy, Jalen Waddle versus the Bengals. We know this one, right? Like, I think you guys talked about this on yesterday's show, went over all these players for the Dolphins, but Waddle hasn't topped 55 yards in 4 straight games. Now he's got Quinn Ewers under center. Do we really feel like it's going to turn around and this is going to be a spot where he blows up? Plus, DJ Turner, we know he can create problems for opposing number one wideouts. So I see Waddle as more of like a low-end wide receiver too, if that, in this game. I worry about him. I think if you have players in that range, which people certainly could based on, the drafts this summer, trades throughout the season, I think you might want to consider sitting Waddle this week. Derrick Henry versus the Patriots. Patriots are allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs this season. Henry's given up more work too, right? Keaton Mitchell, Rasheen Ali, we've seen these guys get involved. I think Henry is still good. I don't think he's quite as agile maybe as he used to be. I think he's still pretty quick. Like if he gets that head of steam going, he's still pretty quick. But in terms of like plays that are like longer to develop, he just doesn't quite look the same. I said this for a little while, right? Like he's still a decent fantasy back, but when you get into these tougher matchups, I worry that we just don't have the same ceiling for Henry in fantasy. I think that's the case here. This is a tougher opponent. So I see him more as like a risky RB2 rather than that like top 10, top 12 option that he often is ranked as. And then the other one for me would be Brock Bowers, who I mentioned. The matchup with the Texans is tough. He's just not really that elite fantasy option anymore, right? And he often still produces, still gives you okay stats. I know it wasn't a great one last week because he was going against the Eagles, who are tough against tight ends. Well, guess who else is tough against tight ends? The Houston Texans defense, right? And we could just see this Raiders offense get completely shut down here. So I worry about Bowers. Doesn't mean I'm putting him down in like the tight end 2 range, but moves him down into like that mid-range tight end 1 area and makes you a lot more concerned about having him in your lineup where you drafted him to be that piece that was going to get you over the top. And he is just not that guy right now.
Okay, so let's pull on some of these threads here. Obviously, Josh Allen, we don't even need to discuss. I think Derrick Henry probably can't really bench Derrick Henry, but I do think he might be more of like a volatile running back too, but do you necessarily have 2 better options? I don't know about that. Jalen Waddle, I agree with you. I mean, we talked about it yesterday with Nate that's the trend against Cincinnati. Your running backs, especially running back pass catchers, and your tight ends are going to thump the Bengals, and your wide receiver 1 is going to get not blanked all the time, but they're definitely going to have a slow outing. How is that not going to happen here against this team with Quinn Ewers now under center? I feel like it's going to be a lot of Achane. It's going to be a lot of Darren Waller. And, maybe you're hoping on like a big play happens for Jalen Waddle. So he's still somebody that I'm going to have as a top 20 option probably, but like towards that low end of the top 20. So definitely a guy that you could actually bench here. Brock Bowers, you got to have a really good tight end to be like really considering Brock Bowers, like benching him. I think maybe a Harold Fannin type or a Kyle Pitts, if you somehow like pick those guys up off the waiver wire. That's the funny thing about people dunking
Loveland?
Like, I think that might even be too much.
He's in the same ballpark, I think, this week. He's in the same ballpark to me. I'm still probably going to have Bowers higher, but it's close.
It's definitely close. And yeah, like you said, if we ran the sim 100 times, does Colston Loveland outscore Brock Bowers on some of those? Definitely. Maybe even it's close to like 60-40. He doesn't versus does outscore him. I would say that the only, I don't know, one just quick note with the Texans defense, again, looking at the schedule adjusted fantasy points, they're 2nd versus quarterback, 6th versus running backs, 2nd versus wide receivers, and 12th versus tight ends. And you kind of see this with defenses like the Chargers, like the Seahawks, like the Texans, like the Broncos even. The Vikings are this way too, that they're worst against the tight ends relatively now. And because some of that's like, we'll just concede those throws. I mean, it's not crazy production or anything, but it's just sometimes you see that with the best defenses that, they're trying to take away the explosives on the outside. So they'll give you some tight end stuff. Now, Brock Bowers is a different deal than most tight ends. I'm sure the Texans will have a plan for Brock Bowers, but just wanted to make a note of that. The one guy I actually really want to pull the thread on here is Dak Prescott, because not only would I be nervous if I was a Dak Prescott manager, like how concerned are you if you have George Pickens or, CeeDee Lamb, I think can still eat regardless. He actually matches up well against the secondary, but like George Pickens, talked about this yesterday with Nate, is in a difficult spot for the way he particularly wins against this very zone heavy defense, where that's kind of what happened to him last week. The Vikings just bracketed, zoned up his side of the field, and Dak just never went that way because he's playing behind an offensive line that's dealing with injuries right now. So Like, where are we at with the George Pickens and some of these guys in the passing game for Dallas as well?
I almost put Pickens in this section, to be honest, but I figured I probably shouldn't talk about two Cowboys players if we were going to focus on like four guys. But if I would have had a fifth, it would have been Pickens here. And it's for the reasons that you just mentioned. And I love Pickens, and I say this with love, but we've also seen that sometimes when he gets into games where things aren't really going his way, we know how he can kind of turn into that player who's not maybe putting in the same amount of effort late in the game in the second half sort of thing. So I worry about all of that here with him. He is still a volatile fantasy asset, even though he's had a great season. And yes, in this matchup, which is very, very difficult against this Chargers defense, who particularly are tough on the outside. Yeah, I think he's somebody that still is kind of like borderline, low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. But again, how far can you push him down without seeming absolutely insane, right? In terms of the rankings, like there's people that do, and good for them, but sometimes you look at the ranking that it's just kind of crazy. I don't know how far you can push him down without seeming insane. And yet, yes, I have all the worries in the world about him and this entire passing attack. And you're not sitting CeeDee Lamb, but Pickens certainly you question. And Ferguson, I already mentioned, I have him way down in that mid-range tight end 2 area. And that's because I think that there's a good chance that Dak struggles in this game. And because of that, we just don't see the same kind of fantasy numbers from this offense that we normally do.
God, I feel like I've talked about that game every episode this week, the Chargers and the Cowboys. I still have such a bad feel about how that one's going to go on both sides of the ball. So it's definitely a tricky one to project, some tough lineup decisions for sure. But yeah, again, kind of in conclusion here, I really feel like of the players we mentioned, the two guys that you could verifiably consider benching, to me at least, would be Dak Prescott and Jalen Waddle. The other guys, I think just relative to other guys in their position, you're probably not benching them.
Yeah, and I will say, because this is a factor too, that I don't know that Vegas totally agrees with my take here that this could be a potentially a lower scoring game, because 49.5 is the projected point total on that one, and it's a close game. So they think both these teams are going to be able to put up some points. I have my questions about this Cowboys passing attack, but it doesn't seem like Vegas is that worried about it.
That's what I'm saying. Can't get a good feel on how it's going to go. So we'll see what happens when the games actually take place on Sunday. We are going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll go through nobody's games of the week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, it's time. Welcome back. Let's get into literally no one's games of the week. As is, what happens late in the NFL season, the dogs get even doggier, in these disgusting games here where there just is nothing on the line. But we're going to see if there's anything from a fantasy perspective we care about in these 3 games. One of them we kind of already talked about a good bit, so we might not spend too much time on the final one. But the first one, Jets at Saints. I mean, Boone, this one I can see a lot of fantasy interest here on. It's that type of 2 teams that have nothing to play for, other than pride, and it's 2 new coaching staffs who want to end the season on a good note, right? Build for next year. Maybe not everybody wants to build for next year with these teams. I think the guy we're showing to my left here definitely doesn't want to build to anything on this team. That's Breece Hall I'm pointing at for the audio folks. Doesn't want to build to anything with the New York Jets. We'll talk about him in just a second, but want to talk about the Saints in this matchup. We talked about the running backs earlier with Audric Estime, but in the passing game too, Boone, Chris Olave is a guy I'm really high on this week. I mean, I've always been a big Chris Olave fan. I know you like his game as well. He's top 10 in catches and yards among wide receivers this year. Been a solid fantasy player. I think he's got a chance to end the season on a really high note. He was super clutch for this team at the end of that game last week in the win over the Panthers. Tyler Shuck is playing well. Definitely a QB2 option in Superflex right now. No Devon Vele, I think, also matters for Chris Olave here too. Vele has been playing some pretty good ball for the Saints team. Has really fit in as that big slot receiver in Kellen Moore's offense, but no Devon Vele, probably just going to push more looks towards Chris Olave here. So definitely somebody that, we talk about like Jalen Waddle and some of these other volatile receivers, George Pickens. I feel a lot safer with my projections with Chris Olave in this matchup.
Yeah, Olave like all the way up kind of near that low end wide receiver 1 range based on the volume that he gets. And you mentioned it, like Devon Vele out. Also, I believe Mason Tipton missed practice today. So we're getting pretty far down that Saints receiver depth chart at the moment. And that just means even more work for Olave. So that's really exciting for him. And I gave you props on Monday's show because a few weeks back, maybe a month ago or so, you were talking about Tyler Shuck and you were like, I don't know, he kind of looks all right. And I just dismissed it. I was like, he looks fine. Like maybe be a career backup, but come on, Harmon. And yet since then, he's looked a little better.
Hey,
I don't know that he's done enough to like win the job for 2026, but he has looked better and he has managed to be okay for fantasy. I even talked about him as a waiver wire pickup in deeper leagues. He's been all right for fantasy, not a high ceiling, but a guy that you could throw in and might not lose you your week. And also been able to keep this offense moving. And I will say, like, hats off to their entire coaching staff because they've kept that team playing. Like, the Saints are legitimately fun to watch most weeks. And it's not because they're a good team. Like, that's why they end up on a list like this. It's because they keep playing. They're still trying. And that's what you want from your fantasy teams. And I've talked about it before, the idea of having players on teams that are heading to the playoffs because they have something to play for late in the season. And the reason for that, and I never thought this would be the case with this player, is you don't want to see guys like a Travis Kelce or obviously Rashee Rice is in concussion protocol. But when you get to the later stages of the season and teams fall out of the playoff race, a lot of guys have injuries where they just decide they're not going to go out there because why would they and why would they risk it when they're not 100%? And yet the Saints just kind of keep pushing forward and they're putting up okay stats, at least their top guys are. And we're talking about them as fantasy options, not just Olave, but Juwan Johnson's been a pretty good tight end streamer throughout. The backfield that we talked about earlier, looking at those guys in this great matchup against the Jets. So yeah, really impressed by the Saints coaching staff that they've kept this team playing the way that they are and competing the way that they are and allowed us to at least continue to start some of these guys for fantasy.
Okay, at the risk of becoming like the Tyler Shuck guy on the podcast, which I don't want to be. You're crazy for saying he hasn't played himself. He is. I would be stunned if he's not the Saints opening week starter in 2026 for two reasons. One, because I think he's played solid. He's played solid. He's played above my expectations for sure, because I was not like a Tyler Shuck guy in the draft or anything like that. He's played solid. He was drafted 40th overall, so they definitely have a level of investment in him. He's not like he's some rando undrafted free agent. And right now, they'd be picking 7th in the draft. There's not going to be a bunch of quarterbacks that are available where they like if it's, Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore and like that's the draft class, those guys are going to get pushed up out of the Saints' range. So why would you rather just not ride with Tyler Shuck? You're not going to trade for Kyler Murray or do like the Tua thing or anything like that. You're just going to ride with Tyler Shuck next year. So just had to get that on the record because for whatever reason, that's how I feel about Tyler Shuck. So there
I will also say I will be happy if that is the case. I'm not rooting against him by any means. I have a lot of like 3rd round rookie draft shares of Tyler Shuck from dynasty drafts this summer and after the draft. I would be happy if that's the case, but I still have my doubts. That might be one of those, off-season dinners to whoever's right on that one, because I still have my doubts that Shuck's going to be the starter. I
will take you up on that dinner bet right now. All right. Let's do that right now. Tyler Shuck,
put it on the board. Note
starter for the 2026. Let's do that right now. Okay. Just let me read off the names of the other wide receivers on the Saints roster before we move on from this. Other than Devon Vele, Mason Tipton, and Chris Olave, Dante Pettis is still kicking around. Kevin Austin Jr. was the guy running routes for the team last week. Other than those top 3 guys, Samare Toure is on the practice squad.
Oh, wow.
So that's what we're talking about. Juwan Johnson hasn't done much lately, but you'd imagine he would get a little bit of a bump. I think Devon Vele has eaten into the areas that Juwan Johnson has eaten on the field. I did see. Because I'm a weirdo and like I do kind of like to watch the coaches in the locker room, those speeches afterwards. I saw Kellen Moore giving out his game balls or whatever, and giving out some shout outs, and he's like, and shout out to Kevin Austin, 3 catches for 33 yards. Shout out. I was like, okay, well that wasn't Kellen. Come on, like.
Where's the bar?
Yeah, where's the bar for the post-game shout-out? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, on the Jets side in this matchup, I just kind of wanted to – we talked about Adonai Mitchell, which is really the only thing you need to care about the passing game. What's your level of concern on Breece Hall right now? Not coming off of a good game. I don't know if people are, kind of wrestling what to do with Breece Hall, but he's definitely a guy you don't want to narrative scout too much, but you just have to wonder, like, how much does he want to be out there for this team? Is he thinking about free agency? Is he going to be on this team next year? Isaiah Davis is taking snaps from him late in the game. That's something I could actually continue seeing here for Breece Hall over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, 1,000%. I totally agree. Like, normally I think in this kind of matchup, if we felt a little more confidence in his role in the offense and his volume, I'd have him up probably top 15. And yet I have him outside of the top 20. I see him as kind of risky low end RB2. And it's because what we saw last week, that why wouldn't they let Isaiah Davis get some more work? And Hall doesn't obviously want to go out there and get 25 touches on this team that, like you said, he's probably not going to be on next year. So he probably wants them to get Davis more involved. And we saw it last week. I think it's going to continue. I completely agree. I don't know if it's to the point where I would consider using Davis in any fantasy leagues, but you could grab him, stash him on your bench. But I mean, it's possible. Like last week, he had okay stats as that number 2 back who, turning that into a little more of a committee. But yeah, it's kind of just ugly. I wouldn't feel great about starting Breece in this matchup. Probably needs a touchdown. And yet A.D. Mitchell is that one guy that I think could sneak into your lineup if you need help.
What was that, like 8+ minutes on the Brady Cook versus the fighting Tyler Shucks? Tell me which other fantasy football podcast is doing that here in week 16. Probably not. Don't know if that says something good about us or not, but let's move to the next game here. Vikings at Giants. This is definitely one where there's some interesting fantasy storylines here. Absolutely nothing from a playoff standpoint other than the only thing at stake here is, can the Vikings beat the Giants, and can the Giants continue to hold on to the number 1 overall pick, which is there's going to be a ton of like talking points. Do they just trade Jackson Dart, or do they trade that number 1 overall pick? What's the whole deal? That's going to create a lot of offseason buzz. For this week, though, it's definitely a different spot for a lot of the guys that had some success in fantasy last week on the Giants, Tyron Tracy included. That was a good call out by you on last week's show for Tyron Tracy. I told my brother-in-law to play Cortland Sutton over Tyron Tracy and was really nervous until Cortland Sutton found his way into the end zone. So still wasn't obviously the correct call. Tyron Tracy had 2 touchdowns. But nevertheless, what do we feel about the Giants in this offense? I think it's a pretty drastic in this game. I think it's a pretty drastic turnaround from what we saw last week against the Commanders.
Yeah, big time. I'm fairly worried about them. Like Tyron Tracy ends up moving into that like low end RB2 range where it's kind of a big group there, and definitely don't feel as confident about him this week, even though I think you can run on the Vikings. They're definitely harder against the pass.
Yeah.
But still, like overall, this offense, like Dart puts up points. I think some people have ranked him very high this week. I don't have that same confidence. I have him lower than normal in this matchup. I think this could be one that gives him some trouble. Yeah, for sure. And then if that happens, then you worry about all aspects of this offense, right? Because if he's not in rhythm, if he's not humming, if he's not running the ball like he normally does, and they can't get going, now you start to look at all those other pieces that already are kind of like a little bit fringy when you talk about like Theo Johnson as a streamer type at tight end, Darius Slayton. Like, I just don't think you want to get involved in that. Wan'Dale Robinson, your guy, I think you could probably play him, hope you get the volume, but even he is just kind of on that borderline, low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, and he's more of that volume play. So if you can avoid the Giants this week, I probably would try to do that because, yeah, definitely don't feel as excited about them in this matchup.
And on the Vikings side of it, I think, again, much more intriguing storylines here. J.J. McCarthy, your guy, J.J. McCarthy. I mean, you tried to say he was our guy. He is not my guy. Maybe I should have jumped on the train, though, because he obviously had a really nice night against Dallas on Sunday. And this is another gettable matchup for J.J. McCarthy. Certainly it's a good spot. I think he's playing with more confidence right now. He's playing maybe a little bit too confident, with that little gritty crossing over the goal line there. But shout out to him. He deserves to showboat a little bit after the way this season has gone. So it's another spot for him to kind of continue to establish himself as the potential starter in 2026 for this team. We'll see. But certainly, again, good game for him. And it's another gettable spot here. But the big question, as it is every single week, Boone, does it trickle down to the man we're showing on the screen right now, Justin Jefferson? Because despite JJ's success, it didn't happen for Justin Jefferson in the box score, even though he did have a touchdown called back.
Yeah, it's the weirdest situation. It is so strange. Like, I brought up the fact that they had this great late season schedule. I thought that would lift everyone up, especially somebody like Justin Jefferson, and it is just not happening for him. So I have him ranked very low now. I feel like he's somebody that I, even in a good matchup, would be willing to sit on my bench. It's pretty crazy. Like, he's borderline wide receiver too, if that. And I don't even know what to say at this point, Harmon. Like, there's been good matchups. He hasn't come through. This is multiple weeks now. And I do think that the fact that the matchups have been easy is what's helped McCarthy put up some okay stats. He looks better. He does. It's going to take some time here. He needs these kind of confidence building games, and he gets another one this week against this Giants defense. So I think he is a potential streaming option if you have to go deep. You're in the fantasy semifinals this week, so hopefully you don't have to go that deep on it. But I think he could have another okay game here. I'm a little bit interested in like Jordan Addison, just because I feel like someone's going to get the targets. It just doesn't seem to be Justin Jefferson. So somebody else is going to have to come through in this one. And I think Jordan Addison is like that wide receiver 3 flex type play. Could be somebody on your radar. But if you're putting Jefferson in your lineup, which be hard to sit him, I get it. It's a name that you put him in your lineup and you just deal with the disappointment. Let's hope he comes through, but I don't know what we can really point to other than the matchup at this point. And like I said, he's had good matchups and that hasn't got him there in the last few weeks. So it's kind of confounded me. I don't understand it. I hope someone else was going to come along and give me the reason why this was occurring, and I haven't heard anyone do it yet. So it's a very strange situation. And even in the backfield now, they're splitting, right? We're seeing Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. So it's kind of capped those guys' ceilings from a fantasy perspective. So it makes it, there's a reason why this game is involved in this section. And before the season, we would have thought the Vikings wouldn't have shown up here. And yet now they are, because there's just a lot of guys that are underperforming or sort of limited, and their fantasy ceilings are lower now because of the scenario in this offense and the situation that's developed.
So, okay, here's my just last best guess at the Justin Jefferson thing. And before I get into it, the brass tacks of it all, and this isn't really a guess, this is just actually my working theory on it. The brass tacks of it all is that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it can't happen in this matchup, right? Like, again,
True.
if that touchdown hadn't been called back last week, we're at least having a different conversation about it. So, like, it can happen for Justin Jefferson, especially with McCarthy now playing some viable football. If he was still playing like he was weeks ago, I think it would just be a non-starter for me. The reason this is happening is it's kind of the way it always is with wide receivers that are struggling. We're just not used to seeing it with Justin Jefferson. But number one, he's the best receiver on the team. He's the X receiver. He's one of the best receivers in football. He's going to run the hardest routes. He's going to get the hardest coverage. The job is already hard for him, and he's great at that job, but the quarterback has to make those throws. McCarthy just isn't at a place right now where he can consistently make those throws. So he's going to draw the worst volume on the team from a quality perspective. That's part of it. So there's again the alignment and who he is in the offense. The other part of it that we can just be honest about, he's dropped like 8 passes on the season. That's part of it too. Like, I know it's the same. I know these guys are not in the same tier, but the conversation we had all the time about like Emeka Egbuka and Roma Dunze, it's like, well, they're the best receivers on the team. They're getting hard coverage. They're running the most difficult routes on the team, and they're also dropping the football a little bit too much. And the quarterbacks are playing shaky. This is like the extreme bizarro mirror of that, because it's one of the best receivers in football, if not the best receiver in football. And the quarterback has, on balance, played way worse than Baker or Caleb Williams, certainly on the year. So again, it's just, that's why to me it's happened this way. It's just so frustrating, because as he's even had success with some of the easier throws to like the tight ends, and even like Jordan Addison gets behind the defense, he's able to hit that one. It just hasn't happened with those like real deal big boy difficult throws for McCarthy. We'll see if it can come. It's not impossible, but it's got to take a few different factors to get right here.
No notes. That was a very solid breakdown. Do you have much to say about your final game for this section?
No. The final one was Chiefs Titans. I think we've said everything we need to say about the Chiefs, and I don't know about you. I got nothing to say about the Titans other than shout out to Tony Pollard for having a great couple of games here the last few weeks. If for whatever reason you have him on your team, you can definitely play Tony Pollard, I think, in a matchup where the Titans actually might be competitive against the Kansas City Chiefs, this like Frankenstein zombie version of Kansas City here that we might get.
Yeah, Tony Pollard consolation bracket all-star, probably.
Oh yeah, he's ruining your tank jobs in Dynasty right now. If you've had him as a starting running back, you better get him out of your lineups if you're trying to get those early rookie picks. If you're dealing with Tony Pollard there. All right, we're gonna take our final break. We come back. It's the Hurry Up Offense rapid fire questions to finish it out. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. It's time for the Hurry Up Offense rapid fire questions, 40 seconds or less. You know the deal. Welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone, get us started as always.
Okay, so you wrote an article this week about Week 15 playoff heroes and who was most likely to potentially repeat that performance. I want you to tell me, of all the guys you wrote up, who is the most likely? Kyle Pitts, Kenny Gainwell, Ja'Cory Grosky-Merritt, Tyron Tracy Jr., Troy Franklin, or DJ Moore? I'm going to cut out Colby Parkinson because he plays Thursday night, so we'll save you from that. But Pitts, Gainwell, JCM, Tracy Franklin, or DJ Moore? Who are you going with?
I'm glad you remember the names. So I was immediately like, I don't even remember who I wrote about. I would say in order, it actually would be Kyle Pitts, Kenny Gainwell, and then DJ Moore. The rest, I think, are complete dart throws. So yeah, Kyle Pitts definitely I feel the best about, especially relative to tight ends. Kenny Gainwell, I just can't hammer this home enough. Aaron Rodgers loves this guy. He's got a huge pass-catching role, so I definitely think he is live to repeat again this week. All right. I will give you your first one here. Which league are you in that you want to win the most?
I have a league with my high school buddies that I have won once in 7 years I've been in it. They had the league going before I was in it, invited me along the way, and it is definitely the league that I enjoy winning the most. That is the one where I bought a cameo the year that I won and got everybody in the league roasted by Gilbert Godfrey when he was still around. And I'm in the semifinals. And if I win it this year, we'll be getting a cameo again, probably some stand-up comic. I'll have to figure that out. But we got a couple wins to get before we get there. But that is definitely the one that I enjoy winning the most for bragging rights. Not counting the guys who got hurt this year, who has been your most frustrating fantasy player to roster this season?
It probably has been those Cardinals receivers, I think that, the Cardinals receivers have been frustrating, but it's been so good. It's for so many weeks with Michael Wilson. I can't really complain about that. I got a dynasty league with Terry McLaurin. That was other than the league where I picked him up off the waiver wire. And I know he got hurt, so maybe this doesn't count. But even at the beginning of the season, it was so frustrating. So that was definitely one that's up there. The way that Rome's season went is definitely really frustrating. But again, that's another injury-based one. So those would be the ones for me. But yeah, I think the Cardinals, weird situation, that's definitely up there. Okay, kind of sticking on that trend here. What is your biggest fantasy regret this season?
Oh, wow. Again, I shouldn't say this because they play tonight, but the overconfidence that I had in the Seahawks backfield. And Scotty and I talked about this on Monday, right? And I said, he told me, he warned me. He said, don't do it. He said, you can't just draft both these guys and think it's going to work out necessarily. It could end up being this muddled mess, and that's exactly what we've gotten. And at the most important time, those Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet teams, I'm going to be sitting both those guys in my semifinals on most of the lineups that I have. That's how bad it has gotten. Very, very disappointing. Who's your early choice for the consensus 101 in 2026 fantasy drafts? Who do you think is going to go first overall next year?
This guy's had a bit of a weird week, to say the least, and he's playing tonight. But Puka Nacua, I think, will be up there for sure. I think that there's like Christian McCaffrey. Could he go 101? I don't know that people will do that. Where he is.
I feel like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be in that conversation.
Jahmyr Gibbs was going to be the other one. Yeah. If the Lions offensive line is able to build up, I think that would definitely be up there. A sneaky bet that might not happen, but Devon Achane, I think, should be in those conversations as well. He's been awesome this year, and the Dolphins' run game has looked better than I ever expected late in the year. All right. For sure. Last question here. And we know what time it is. It's time for a Would You Rather, but I'm taking a different twist on it this week, Boone. Would you rather have to be drunk on Sunday morning when filing your rankings, or would you rather live without internet access from Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern to Sunday morning at noon Eastern, outside of a small window where you only have time for Thursday Night Football ranked players that evening, and you still have to file your rankings at 1 p.m. Eastern? By the way, you are not on FFL in this scenario. So again, would you rather be blitzed, drunk, hammered Sunday morning? Your little showboating inspired me on FFL to get this question here. Drunk doing your rankings on Sunday morning, or no internet access from Tuesday at 9 a.m. to Sunday noon? Which would you rather have to do to file your rankings?
This is a fantastic question. I don't want to lean on the fact that I feel like I am pretty high functioning when I've had a couple of pops, but I feel like I would be able to do the rankings even after several drinks. And I will say, losing the internet is a devastating thing. I once lost, this was years ago, but I lost the internet one time at my current home. Couldn't get it back going. Power was out. I called a hotel near. It was middle of winter, found out the hotel had power and internet, drove in the middle of an ice storm, almost fell in the parking lot with my laptop sliding on ice, got into the lobby, got everything updated, and submitted the rankings in time. That is a true story, yeah.
Oh my God. The payoff for this question was better than I possibly could imagine. People listening to this show, watching this show, this guy is freaking dedicated right here, okay? He's driving through ice storms. He's falling in parking lots just to get those damn rankings in there. So
almost,
you know what? Next time you
fell.
Almost falling in parking lots. Let the record show correctly. Almost falling in parking lots. That's what Justin Boone is willing to do to get the most accurate rankings there. Boone, you're a legend. Appreciate this show as always. Hell of a time today. Good luck to you in all of your semifinal matchups, brother.
Same to you, man. I hope the Cardinals receivers come through for you.
One definitely won't, and one of those teams will be completely banged because of it, but what can you do? That's life. That's going to do it for us today. Important to note, for those of you busy in the YouTube chat with specific questions, we can't get to them on this show, but we have the show just for you. Every Friday, John Daigle goes live for a Q&A on this YouTube channel at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. He's here for you to answer all of those fantasy questions in real time. Meanwhile, for this show, Chris Allen joins me on Sunday evening for the recap show. We will go live as soon as the late game windows end. So Steelers, Lions, what a game. When that hits 000, join us right here on YouTube. It's, around 7:30-ish Eastern that evening. We're going to be live to recap it all. Until then, we are out.